Took an audition for lyric opera, and I was so prepared. I was so ready. I felt like I knew everything inside and out, and I did play, for me at that time, the best audition of my life. I played my last note and, mic drop. I was just like, okay, that was it. I just nailed that and give me that job. And unfortunately enough, somebody else had the audition of their life the same day. And the decision was made to hire the other person. It took a long time to recover from that, and it was to make sense of it, to think, okay, that was my best and it's not good enough. So somehow I needed to exceed my best. And that was daunting.
Hey everybody, this is Chris from honestypill.com. Welcome to episode 37. Yes, I've done 37 of these things already, and this is episode 2 of season 3, where we are streaming live video. We are here to help you with all things music, whether it's getting better at practicing, performing, nailing down those auditions, or even starting your own music-related business. This season, we're going to dig into all the details of what goes on behind the scenes in the practice room, on stage, and how not only to make an impact as a creative, but also how to make a great living. Stick around, because today we've got someone super special on deck that you are not going to want to miss. But first, a quick shout out to the sponsor of the Honesty Pill podcast, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Stay tuned for more on them later. And we are live streaming this episode, as I mentioned. So go ahead and drop your questions and comments in the chat. I can see we've got people watching already. No net today, guys. No perfectionism and no editing. So let's buckle up and see what happens. All right, let's get into it. I am thrilled to announce my guest for today. We've got an amazing horn player in the house who's got some incredible stories and wisdom to share, Mr. Neil Kimel. Neil's career in Chicagoland is kind of a Cinderella story, starting his studies in the Windy City, going away, and then leaving for seasons, right? They call them seasons. Leaving for 3 seasons at the New World Symphony, and then coming back to Chicago to join both the Grant Park Orchestra and the Chicago Lyric Orchestra for a perfect Cinderella fit. And there's more. Neil is all about spreading the knowledge. He's a chamber music coach at Northwestern and an adjunct faculty at DePaul University, helping musicians nailing those auditions and perfecting their practice routines. I'm sure they're all absolutely perfect at practicing. Hopefully, we can tap into some of that information today, too. Oh, and pass the popcorn, because Neil also has a BA in Cinema Studies from the University of Wisconsin. Welcome to the show, Neil Kimel.
Thank you, Chris. So good to see you as always.
I'm just going to hide this comment here if I can get it to go away. There he is. Man, it is great to see you. We haven't caught up in a heck of a long time. And I just want to state, which I think is hysterical, that both episode 36, which is the first video, and this one, somehow my guest and I are completely color coordinated. We did not talk about Merlot, but I'm loving how great minds think alike. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I want to take us back to 1995 at Tanglewood, which seems like a long time ago. I think it was Kurtog, right? What sticks out from your mind in that musical experience at Tanglewood? What do you remember from that summer, if anything?
Yeah, some of the longest playing days of my career. I think we sometimes had 12-hour days, which seemed impossible, but we somehow did it. Working with Seiji Ozawa, working with Bernard Haitink, huge career milestones at an early phase, which was fantastic. It also brought about a level of playing that I don't think I ever experienced before. So it was really a transformative summer. I was lucky enough to come back a second year in 96 and experience it again. And when I was there that first year, I had recently started freelancing, where I was living in Milwaukee, and I had just won my first job with the Milwaukee Ballet Orchestra. And I thought, great, I'm a working musician. I'm all set. I'm done. But when I got to Tanglewood, I kind of realized the level that I was seeing day to day, and then just another level much, much higher that existed. And being at Tanglewood really exposed me to that. And at the time, I was a finalist with the New World Symphony, and where I was, I thought, this is great, and I'll stay as a finalist, and I'll go down to Florida when I want to and, sub there. But once I was at Tanglewood experiencing players such as yourself, I realized I needed this kind of every day. So I re-auditioned for New World and was happily accepted. And right after I finished Tanglewood, I packed up my car and moved to Miami. So it was a very big transition summer for me.
By the way, thank you for the kind comments. But I look back on my playing in '95, and I feel like I didn't know what the heck I was doing. It was sort of an accident. Somehow I stumbled into Tanglewood, and I think a lot of people get auditions or win auditions for festivals or orchestras, sometimes without knowing what they're doing, and then you have to quickly reverse engineer. Okay, how do I actually drive this bus now that somebody buckled me in? But I want to just share with everyone listening that the first time we met, I'm sure we saw each other before at Tanglewood, but the first time that I remember you, because this was quite a memorable moment, was I must have been sitting to your right, and this Kurtog piece we had to play, you had a bells up thing, and I was just sitting there. I think we were like in the balcony too, like antiphonal, and you just like ripped it like it was unbelievable. And I kind of flinched a little. Maybe I cried inside a little, and I just looked over and I was like, "You have amazing tone, man." I'm Chris. Do you remember that performance at all?
I actually do remember it, and yeah, the balcony of Ozawa Hall was it's a spectacular space, and being antiphonal like that and everything, and then the sound in that hall, which I think helped what I was able to do, facilitated it. But yeah, it's I play in an opera orchestra now, so we play softly a lot, but we're in the midst of a run of Flying Dutchman moments where they want loud. So that it's in my toolbox still. I've still got it.
You still have, of course, you still have it. All right, I want to just, guys, you people watching, can talk amongst yourselves for a second. I want to share a little nostalgia with Neil. I actually found a website where someone has scanned every single program
Oh my god,
from the Tanglewood Music Center. Like, I don't even know how far back it goes, but look what I found. I found.
that's
Let me see.
incredible.
Let me see if I can find it now. Here it is. I think this was the piece, Samuel Beckett, What is the Word? Or it could have been this piece, Steel, Opus 33. But I mean, so basically we met somewhere in 1995, August-ish, and either this piece, anybody listening knows which piece is which, let me know. But isn't this insane? Like it has, this brochure here has like even the typed rehearsals. Let me see if I can scroll back a whole bunch. Yeah, like program notes from that summer, assignments, rehearsal, locations. It's quite a trip through memory lane.
Wow. Well, Harry would be impressed that all this has been, held to the internet for all time.
Yes, you're of course talking about Harry Shapiro, one of the I don't know, what would you call him? He's like the daddy, the father, the uncle.
He was an institution. He used to play horn in the Boston Symphony and just ran Tanglewood like a well-oiled machine.
That's like 100 years ago. Okay, back to the podcast. I'm glad we here. I have a harp sound somewhere. There it is. Okay, we talked about 1995. I want to go back a little bit, way back, and let's start at the beginning. What first drew you to the horn, or were you one of those people in band who started out on the trumpet or some other instrument and was so good that your band teacher said, "Put this kid on a French horn. He's actually better than everybody else"?
Yeah, I wasn't good, and I didn't start on the trumpet. I we'll speed through this as much as we can so people don't glaze over. I started in a really spectacular junior high music program run by a young go-getter of a conductor with whom I'm still in touch these days. She was a really kind of inspirational teacher who fueled a love for music, and I picked the instrument out of complete and utter ignorance. I didn't know anything about it. I thought it was kind of cool looking. It was kind of in a circle, and I honestly, Chris, I didn't know anything about it. I brought it home. My mom was talking. I can vividly remember my mom was talking on the phone, and I've got this French horn case that I could barely lift off the ground, and she looks at me like I've lost my mind, and she's like, "Okay, yeah, this will last, few weeks, and then he'll move on to something else." Fast forward 43, 44 years or something, still going, to her shock and dismay. But yeah, it was a really amazing start. It brought about great experiences right away, and it got me out of classes because when we took our private lessons, we were allowed to leave our class. So I love that. But it just, even in, I was in youth orchestra here in Chicago, which was, again, like you said, if I tried to audition today, I'd never get in. But back then I was somehow able to be accepted, and we traveled with them. It just felt like an escape from real life, and who doesn't like that? So the experiences were always good. I loved the music. I was drawn to the music early on. I still am a huge nerd. I love listening to classical music. It just, the music of John Williams. I know you've worked with him many times, and that inspired all of us as brass players at that age. And so listening to music soundtracks, from films that I loved and still love, and then kind of moving across to the orchestral repertoire and things like that. And just that sound that I still love, get to make that sound every day. And it's a thrill, as you know.
You mentioned, and by the way, yeah, the John Williams totally resonates because I think that might have been some of the first trumpet sounds I ever heard in my life were from those films. It's so serendipitous and lucky that we were growing up with that as our soundtrack. But you mentioned you were into a spectacular junior high. What do you mean by that? What made it spectacular?
The teacher, I mean, just first and foremost, she just was young and a go-getter, and really made me interested in something that I knew nothing about. So yeah, that was the main thing. And then just good, all along it was about the teachers. So her as just a band director who could play all these instruments, which boggled my mind. Moving on to Mary Gingrich, who was my first private teacher. She is still married to Daniel Gingrich, who's in the Chicago Symphony, associate principal horn. And when she became pregnant with her daughter, Dan was nice enough to take me on as a student. So I got to hear a member of the Chicago Symphony up close and personal for a couple of years. And, you know, like you said, the first trumpet sounds you heard, to grow up in Chicago and to hear the French horn played by the likes of Dan, Dale Clevenger, and other members of, this fine section. I live down the street from Gail Williams. I mean, it's, to have that in your backyard is the best way to implant it. If you know what it sounds like, that's half the battle. Getting it to sound that way, we both know is incredibly difficult. But if you know that sound, at least you know what you're seeking. I had that, and that's a huge advantage, I think, growing up in Chicago. Uh, Nobody handed me either of my job, but I knew the sound that I was going after. So that really helped. And then on to college, I studied with a gentleman named Barry Benjamin, who was a New Yorker, played in the New York City Ballet and the Dorian Wind Quintet, which is, I think, an ensemble that still exists in a different iteration. And he had the most beautiful sound, very different from Chicago, but taught me a lot about the horn and about being a consistent player and a musical player. And sometimes I would bring things into lessons he knew nothing about because of his background. Maybe I had more symphonic leanings than he had experience of, but he still brought about a great way of making my playing better that I still use. One thing hopefully we can talk about today as far as practice, but one thing that he really laid on me that helps me. I warmed up with this yesterday and it really helped my performance. And so all of my teachers, my main teachers, have been big inspirations, and my job teaching at DePaul, something I kind of fell into, but really thrilled about. I love my students, and it's a real honor to carry forward everything that's been instilled in me, as I'm sure you with your teachers.
You mentioned you literally grew up down the street from Gail Williams, so you didn't really have a choice. You're becoming a French horn player, whether you liked it or not, probably. Let's talk about two quick things based on what you just brought up. I'm really curious about the practice techniques that you warmed up with yesterday and what that is, but I'm also interested in knowing your opinion on, is it possible to gain traction and have a successful career like you did when you don't have all those advantages and you don't have that sound of the Chicago Symphony in your ear growing up? Because there's so many people who come to this industry late, quote unquote late, or they are from areas where they didn't have access, which is obviously changing a lot now with, Berlin Concert Hall and all the YouTube and everything you can get to. What do you think that there's a path to success that doesn't start out in that, optimal position that you did?
You just answered your own question. Yeah, we have so much access to world-class music at the push of a button. My students, your students, everybody's students, they can incredibly quickly get these recordings or videos and things on YouTube. And, yes, recordings existed. We had CDs and things like that, but from your computer that you could access so many of these things so quickly. And I do find just another benefit, even though I had the Chicago Symphony in my backyard, that I listened to this repertoire growing up. I hadn't played any of these pieces, but they were in me. So when I had the chance to finally play them, I knew how they went. I knew, the turns, I knew the pitfalls, I knew the funky rhythms and Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet, so I wouldn't step in those holes. They were in me already. So when I had the sheet music in front of me, I felt I had a great advantage there. So, a great reader, read a lot. I listened a lot, and I think that put me in a really good place. The strange thing was I didn't listen to a lot of opera growing up, so I had to play a little catch up as far as that goes. But symphonically, I was really ahead of the game, and that helped me tremendously.
And we're going to talk about the difference between symphonic and opera in a minute. I would love to pick your brain. By the way, a quick shout out to Luis, who's here, and Kate, and there's a whole bunch of other people who, if you want to put your name and where you're located in the chat, we'll be able to see you. I want to pick your brain a little bit about practice and auditions. So I think one of the biggest challenges for musicians right now is they have never experienced what it feels like to have a successful round or a successful audition where you win, because most people, 90%, don't get the job. The 10% that do know what it looks like. So my question is sort of around the visualization and manifestation aspect of a career where there is no clearly defined through line. How do you envision what it looks like to win a job when you haven't? How do you walk somebody through the path of audition preparation when it's all very, nebulous and theoretical at that point? That question kind of makes sense. I'm not sure it did.
I think I know what you're after. And yeah, how long is this podcast? Because this could go on for a while. I'll really try and streamline as much as I can. So the thing I really love to focus on with people I'm coaching, be it a violinist, a clarinetist, a horn player, the audition itself it's something different. So we need to really consider it inside of the practice room. So most people I find, and this is one of my big learning moments that really helped me, was that I need to be thinking of, be it the recital, the performance, the audition, when I'm in the practice room, when I'm here at home, that needs to be going through my mind. If it happens going through my mind when I'm on stage, for me personally, it's way too late. It needs to happen on day one of preparation. So people talk about visualization, people talk about all these different techniques. I'm super literal about this. So this just happened because again, going back to movies and things, I'm very, very visual. So visualization for me is an extreme sport. So I will Basically, like an audition for the Chicago Symphony, I found a brochure. This was maybe before all the, ubiquitous images on the internet. I found a brochure for season tickets. And so the way they showed it was the seating chart was a picture of the hall taken from the stage, which ultimately was going to be my vantage point when I was going to be taking the audition. So I cut that off the back of the brochure and I put it on my music stand. And that's what I was looking at while I was practicing. So I didn't have to strain to visualize, it was there. So when I would get on stage, it matched up. My practice room, I basically try and link the practice room to the performance. And then when I'm at the performance of the audition, I'm thinking back to my practice room. What am I doing there that works? What am I doing there that I consistently want to do? I basically build a routine into every excerpt, every entrance of everything I'm playing, how I'm going to breathe, what I'm going to do. So many different little bits of minutia that are planned out, but they become a security blanket of familiarity that I can apply to each one. So when I'm there, it's not something unusual. It's not something different. It's not something to cause distraction. There's this connection, and that to me again gives me comfort to allow me to reproduce what I do in the practice room, not to fall far beneath it, not to try and far exceed it, just recreate it. And I think that's the biggest mistake people make is like, boy, I'm going to play so well that day, like I've never played before. Well, no, if like this is your best you can play, if I can get like to there, if I can get really close, to me that's a successful audition. If you're looking to exceed your best the day of, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to play what you consider a good audition. If you can come close, 90, 95%, that to me is a successful audition, no matter what the committee says. They're going to have opinions, they're going to have different thoughts on the level of your playing, but only you know your best. Only you know what you're capable of. So that's all you can do. If you turn around and you're at an audition and you see the ghost of Bud Herseth there, you're not you're immediately going to be feeling distracted and really affected by that. It doesn't matter who else is there. They might have a really good day. They have a really bad day. You want to play your most consistent audition, and how you're judged with that is how you're judged with that. The rest, it's out of your hands, but the playing is completely up to you. You need to make that time, that those 5 minutes, those 10 minutes, if you're lucky, you're in the driver's seat. You need to take command of those 10 minutes and play in such a way so convincing, so with such conviction that no matter what the opinion of those 7, 9 people on the other side of the screen think, you're making them reconsider their thoughts. And I've sat on the other side of the screen now. I've counted maybe, thousands of times between Grant Park and Lyric. I'm an audition junkie like you are, Chris, and I enjoy sitting on auditions. I'm a bit of a masochist, and I still learn things from it, and I still pass them on to my students. I pass them on to people I coach, and they need to know what happens on the other side of that screen. People sitting on their phone doing crossword puzzles, eating donuts, drinking coffee. You need to wake them up. You need to play in such a way that they come out of their stupor and be like, oh, this is really good. Or if they're incredibly critical, make them put their pen down and just enjoy what you're doing. And that is a really hard thing to do, to play through that screen, to communicate with these strangers on the other side of the screen and tell your story in such a convincing fashion. The example I always use is that I was some whole audition I was sitting on the committee for, and somebody was playing Start No Surprise, and they played it so differently than I normally play it. And at first I found it distracting, but this person, who I don't know who they are, played with so much conviction and so much dedication to this different way. It made me reconsider certain phrases, certain breathing patterns, and it was great. It wasn't like you're wrong. It was like, now that's interesting. So don't try and second guess the committee because you'll always lose. But just find something that fits within the parameters of tempo and style and commit to it with every ounce of your being and sell it. And if they still don't buy it, try again. But it really playing with conviction, playing with authority, and an exclamation point instead of a question mark goes a long way.
I love that point about exclamation point. But you said so many great things I want to unpack. I want to roll back to something you said about what's going through your mind right before you start to play, how you're setting yourself up for optimal delivery. What can you talk about that? Can maybe give us a specific example of an excerpt where that methodology of ramping up or getting the escalator moving first? What does that look like? How I think this is something people don't do enough. And Bob Rotella, Golf is Not a Game of Perfect, which I preach constantly, talks about the pre-shot routine. What is an example of that for you, and why is that so important?
So, like this gentleman you just spoke of, I call it a routine. That is, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I was thinking of writing a book called The Routine, or just like writing it down in such a way. It's something I still do, and I find it works so well with my students because I don't feel you can just pick up the horn and play. I can't. Okay, that's all I'm saying. You might be able to. You're a phenomenal player, but I need something to wind me up. I need something to put me in the right place to where when I hit play on the iPod, or if I, something to begin, that I have this momentum going, mental momentum, physical momentum, and that again, it's a security blanket. It's something I've developed to make the consistency at a high level. Well, we were just talking about this the other day. I mean, Till Eulenspiegel, of course, like many different horn auditions, it's going to be on there. And did I just see that? Is that
you did? I was like, we're going to get to that. I'm setting this up. Go ahead. Talk about Till Eulenspiegel.
Okay. You just I
see, guys.
I get distracted.
This is why you got to watch the YouTube. People who are listening in your cars, you just missed that. It was awesome. Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Go for it.
Okay. So there's going to be the sound of many people disconnecting from the podcast. This is going to get super deep, so I'm sorry for anybody who's just casually listening. The rhythm Spiegel is super complicated because there's no downbeat, and it's all about cockeyed rhythms and odd things like that. So one problem with it is what precedes it, this ascending clarinet line, relates in no way, shape, or form to what we're about to play. So I always ask people, what are you thinking about before you start this? Like, oh, the strings and the clarinets. I'm like, yeah, that's great. You need to hear that and everything, but it really, it is unrelated to what you're about to do. When we play this for a committee, the committee's made of, violists, bass players, percussionists. This might be the first time they're seeing this rhythm on paper. So we need to be really, really explicit with how it goes. So in my preparation for this, the first thing I do is just kind of start tapping my toe for my tempo. I get it, kind of set up. And I've already planned out for me. Let's see. There's 2 beats before I enter. And so I already know for me, I'm breathing on beat 2 of the bar before, which I'm going to stop here for 1 second and interrupt myself. Basically, if there's bar 1 of the excerpt, I'm always considering what I call bar -1. What's happening there, either in the orchestra or just in my mind, that I can apply to making bar 1 happen or kind of join the moving train that's already happening. If it's the first bar of a piece, it's a little harder, but in this particular case, it's a little easier for me. So, if we're going along and I'm just counting, so I take the breath in the tempo and the style of what I'm about to play. So the breath kind of matches really well. And as you know, sometimes you hear a breath and you as a committee member can already tell that person's tempo through the screen. because the distance from their breath to their first note is essentially their tempo. That is something it's really hard to get across to somebody unless they've sat on the other side. And I've tried to demonstrate, if I'm going to be playing, Siegfried or something really big and energetic, I'm not going to breathe. I'm not going to go kind of nuts. I'm going to breathe like I'm going to play. And the breathing either relaxes me or fires me up. And it does the same thing for the listener, which I've told this to string players too. Like sometimes when they need to breathe to relax and loosen up, to breathe like they want to sound. And it relaxes some of their tension, and it also just kind of, I think, helps create the mood of what they're going to do. So to Eulenspiegel, getting the tempo, breathing on a planned beat the bar before, but then the weird sensation of generating or synthesizing this silent downbeat that doesn't exist, which is really hard to do. So if you're counting 1, 2, 1, da, 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 it's really hard to do. And you need to basically sound like you're not playing on a downbeat, which is really difficult to achieve. But I think it helps set up the rhythm to the people listening. And if they're listening in such a way that you can communicate this, they have to work less hard on the other side of the screen and you get advanced. So that's the shortcut of it all. But all these different things of planning the breath, getting the tempo, figuring out all these different things before you start, and finding a better way to start. For some people, I like breathing much, much earlier and kind of having a long, slow breath. I'm more comfortable breathing closer to the entrance. That's just my habit and comfort. And for me, it really helps for the planning of the start of the excerpt. So I think just trying different things. What increases your success rate? When you find out what it is for you, write it down. Just keep reminding yourself. So if you name any excerpt, I can tell you my little preparation in a few quick steps, even though this took probably 10 minutes too long. But it really, whenever I would get to the audition and they'd ask for the certain excerpt, I'd have my routine laid out. And as I got better and better at auditions, it was just like this is, young people aren't going to get this, but like a Rolodex, you kind of scroll to the right excerpt and you see on the card what's written, and it's like, okay, this is what I do, and I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to be consistent and recreate that every time. And that helped me get better and better at auditioning.
A Rolodex is one of these things, guys, but made out of paper. Lots of paper. Neil, thank you. This is so enlightening. I want to ask you one more question about this pre-shot routine before we move on, and that is so you talked a little bit about the technical nuts and bolts of the breath and how it communicates time and how it sets you up for the card trick that is showing an invisible downbeat in an audition. What does it do for your mental, like the chatter, the squirrels running around your brain? What does having that pre-shot routine that you've thought about, tested under pressure, and now are ready to deliver, what does it do to your sort of mindset in that moment?
Perfect question. You're so good at this. This is great. So yeah, when we were coming up, like something that you're doing right now didn't exist. We basically, Don Green was kind of the first on the scene with this stuff, and I was lucky enough to get to work with him in Person New World. That was a huge benefit, and a real convert to somebody actually talking about this. Like I sit and practice all day, but my mind was getting in my way, and from reading his stuff, I wasn't the only one. And so what he talks about, just the chatter, the negative talk, things that really get in our way. What this does in a nutshell is to block that, have something productive to focus on, something that you think about every time, versus getting on stage. And this, if you take one thing away from today, I always try and talk about this. When you get on stage at the audition, it's so quiet. It's so quiet. Whenever you practice, there's always there's always noises. There's always something. The refrigerator running, traffic outside. If you're at a university, the saxophone player practicing next door to you or something. You don't realize it until you get on stage. And I don't know about Disney Hall, but man, taking an audition at Symphony Center here in Chicago, to me, that is like, it's about as quiet as the grave. There's nothing quieter. So when you get up there and you want to start something so quiet, and if that's the first time you address that quiet, your mind goes 6,000 places, and you don't want to play that first note because it's so quiet. You don't want to break the silence. So what this routine does, it gives you something positive to focus on and keeps the distractions off to the side, basically. So you have something, instead of like, oh my God, what do I do? You always go back to your routine. And again, I use that word security blanket. It gives me something to cling on to that's productive, positive, and reliable. And that's where I go in that silence.
What a great answer. That's fantastic. I
Thank
concur
you.
everything you just said, because I think it's important to hear it out loud. And yes, don't wait till you've sat down at an audition to experiment with that silence for the first time, because it is shocking. By the way, your sister Jana is here, and she's kind of throwing you under the bus and giving you a little bit of a backhanded compliment. She says, Neil's sister Jana here, and I can attest that he did not start out as a talent. Thanks. But I can also attest that he has incredible persistence and true love for music. Yeah, and thank you for the comment, because I I think that I don't really believe in talent. I think there are certain people who have different things in their playing that they're maybe more positioned well for, but hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard every single time. And so don't worry if you're not born of musical parents or had a great setup and whatever, have the expensive violin. It really doesn't matter. You can outwork. I will outwork you every time at an audition, because I didn't start out as a talent either. So there's another question in the chat I wanted to share from Sophia. And thank you for the chat questions, guys. Keep them coming. This is your chance to ask a world-class musician some questions here. Sophia asks, how do you prepare for the obstacle course? By the way, I love that description of an audition, meaning being able to deliver at the highest level in unrealistic situations.
Sophia, that's a fantastic question, because it's a total minefield. And if you show up expecting that everything's going to run smoothly and efficiently and on time, yeah, you got another thing coming. Auditions they're beasts. They're difficult things. You spend all this time, preparing and all the music and everything, but logistics are something that are really difficult. So another thing in my visualization process, if at all possible, I really like to get as much information as I can, about how things may be run, maybe from the personnel manager. I don't like to be a nag, but I like just find out as much as I can. If I'm going out of town for the audition, if I'm like staying in a hotel, Google the hotel, whatever you want to do. But even the day before the audition, if I'm there, I will somehow, if I'm walking, if I'm taking public transport, just do the pre-day, kind of relive it before you actually do it. So there are fewer unexpected turns. If you're, let's just say you're, staying downtown LA and taking an audition, if it's walkable, walk to the hall, see where the stage door is. Maybe it's on the other side from where you expected it. Just so when the day comes, you've lived as much of it as possible. Another thing I like to say is practice in the clothing you're going to, do your audition in, your recital, and, maybe those pants shrank in the wash or something. You just want to be sure, like what it feels like. You've done as much of it physically in reality until, before you've done it. So when you actually do it, it's not the first time. You have to trick your mind and be like, I've already done this. And so your mind doesn't trick you with stuff. The other things, yeah, I mean, personnel managers, proctors at auditions can be really challenging. So as politely as possible, you need to stand up for yourself. You need to basically be an advocate for yourself. So, an example, my last audition that I took for lyric opera, I was, I mean, it's in the final round, and they give you your own warm up room, and I'm warming up and freaking out, even though I do all these wonderful techniques and everything. I'm still anxious about it. And the person said, you'll have about 20 minutes, and then we'll come get you. And I'm like, great. And at this time, one of my new techniques that really works and I highly recommend is to put your instrument down, walk away from it. Don't obsessively practice and hit that one spot 5, 10, 15 more times. You have to trust the work has been done. And somebody I worked with kind of told me to do this, and it really worked. Basically, just put the instrument down, walk away, and trust that the preparation has been done. And the sheer act of putting your instrument down, even though it's drawing it, it wants you to pick it up, but resist it because you've done this work. So I'm doing this, and across the room from my horn, and maybe about 5 to 10 minutes later, the same proctor comes back and knocks on the door, and he said, "We're ready for you." And my heart starts beating. And I said, "Well, you said I had about 20 minutes." Like, "Yeah, well, we're running a little ahead of schedule," which you don't always like to hear. I said, "Well, my first instinct with most people would be appease the person who's in control here, just go do it." I took a breath, I took a beat, and I said, "Well, since you're so far ahead of schedule, may I just ask you for 2 minutes, 3 minutes to just warm up again, because I thought I had more time. So if I could just have a few more minutes, I'll be ready, and then I'll play an audition I want to play." And I said, "Is that okay?" And he looked at his watch. He's like, I think that should be fine." So, he came back in a few minutes, and I played again, and I felt better about it. And I felt good about myself for kind of taking my fate into my own hands and not just rolling with it. So there's a fine line of being a jerk and being, an advocate for yourself. So those few minutes just got me back and warm, and then I was ready to go, and I felt in control. And then when I got in the room, I had a little more of a sensation of control, and it gave me a little bit of confidence. I sat down. The other thing that I did want to talk about was, this is the last formal audition I took. I had prepared, what I'd hoped and felt was, the highest level possible. And it was a very long list of opera excerpts. And I felt good about all of them. There wasn't the one or two like, oh, really hope they don't ask for that one, because they're going to ask for that one. So I felt fully prepared on them all. So when I sat down and I didn't know what they were going to ask, I just felt like, okay, what do you want to hear? And that feeling, I don't know if it was the first time I felt it, but it was the strongest time I felt that. And to not go in with any fear or any worry is a really great feeling. To get there, it takes time, and what you think is preparation we'll get to, but it's just a wonderful feeling. So the confidence of not sassing back at the proctor, but really, standing up for myself and then going in feeling prepared was a good mix. So there are a lot of pitfalls, but try not to overreact, keep a level head, breathe, and stand up for yourself if you need to, politely.
This is great, great advice. I love it. Okay, I'm going to catch up to the chat because you have a lot of people asking you questions here. First of all, Sophia actually is Luis Garcia. He's using his daughter's account. So hello, Luis. And also James Nichols says, "Get your own darn account." And so don't kill the messenger. I'm just connecting you guys. You guys can hash it out. There's fun stuff in the chat right here. Okay, Bryce has a question, and it is this one, which is, how many mock auditions do you recommend before an audition?
As many as your friends and teachers will put up with. Never too many. It's such a good thing. I wouldn't do it, on the first day you get the audition list, but prepare it. When you feel like you've got something to present to somebody, do it. see where the nerves and distractions take you. See what gets affected. If there's an excerpt that is good to go, use some kind of, like, I call triage. Like, just put that excerpt aside. It's in a good place, But the ones that really need the attention, bring them up in your preparation, get them to work. And when you play in front of people and you record yourself, which I would hope you do, be cognizant of where your mind goes. What distractions happen when you get nervous? Where do you focus? What is compromised in your playing? I even go as far with some of my students, since we don't always have a screen in our studio or in our home when we're teaching or something. I basically just have them turn around and play with their backs to me, and that way you can't see me, but I'm there. And that is a really cheap way to synthesize an audition, a distraction that's, again, it's not visual, it's all mental. And that's what's hard to recreate, and why at auditions we get so distracted. These distractions need to be addressed early on. So I do recommend this thing of just turning your back, playing for somebody, and just see, you're thinking about them more than you actually think you are. Sometimes when you see them, it's not as big a deal. It's when you don't see them. And I think, again, just making the screen, a thing, even when it's not there, it's a great way to do it. So I hope that kind of helps.
I want to just add one thing to this comment about how many mocks. Another question is what is a mock? What constitutes a mock? Does it mean putting on the suit and heading down to the location and having yellow pads and water bottles for people? Yeah, that's a mock. But another mock is also your friends want to leave the house for pizza. You could run into your studio or your bedroom, throw on your iPhone and play 3 excerpts at random and record it. That's also a mock. Anything that simulates, well, I call it the red light bulb, like in the studio, where it matters. It's go time. It's the critical moment, is beneficial for everything that Neil is saying, which is try to walk on the ground of every aspect that you can before the audition so that you're familiar with that terrain when you actually get there and can pivot and respond when things don't go well, which leads me into another question from the chat. James is saying people talk about pre-shot routines and all the stuff that goes before you hit the ball, start the excerpt. He's talking about how do you get back on track when things aren't going your way? Love to hear thoughts on how to recover. It's a great question.
Well, James doesn't make mistakes, so he doesn't know. It's not a thing for him. No,
That's true.
It's an art form for sure. And so I remember hearing one audition. This guy was playing, person behind the screen, I have no idea who it was, but he was playing with such authority and such amazing ability. I was just hanging on every note, and don't remember what the excerpt was, but they were going towards something and then just kind of missed a pretty big note. It was, I don't know, it's just some big high note in something. And it was such a shame. I was like, oh, it's such a bummer. But then, like, the excerpt kept going. It almost seemed like they didn't even realize they missed the note. They had such fortitude and just kept going. I liken it to, like, if you run over a squirrel and you're driving, you can't do that, or it'll, run into a tree. You have to keep looking forward. If the moment you start thinking back to that, you're doomed, and you're going to miss more and more and more things. So really stay in the present, stay in the future, stay out of the past as much as you can. I know it's easy to say that, James, but anytime that happens to me in a performance, I really try and follow my own advice, and it usually works, but every so often it's big enough where it's really hard to do. So I understand it's a challenge, but really trying to stay present, and there's nothing you can do about it. I know we can think about I played a 2.5 hour Wagner opera yesterday, straight through, no intermission, no time to stop doing anything. And I felt it was one of the most focused performances I've played. And I just kind of kept, like, to be in flow for 2.5 hours is incredibly exhausting. To stay that present, and what transposition am I in? What's the rhythm coming up? Do I need to wait slightly here or not? And with opera, every beat is like that. And to just, stay in that moment. I had a really good run, and I was just, maybe one little note, something happens, and it's like, okay, it happened. Let's, keep moving on, because there's still another act and a half coming. So it's tough to do, but it's important.
James says, "Kill the squirrel." Got it. Okay, yeah, I think that's basically what Neil is saying. This conversation is amazing. I'm bummed because I have so many questions, and I don't want to keep you here forever, Neil. But I have to take a quick moment. Hang on a second for me. I need to pause to give some love to the sponsor of this podcast. They're the people that make this happen, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Yamaha, when they approached me to be a Yamaha artist, it was the easiest decision ever because I really actually love the instruments that I play and I love what the company stands for, particularly their support of music education, which is a huge passion of mine. And it's something I think critical to building society, supporting kids, giving them a place to belong. And Yamaha has sort of been on the forefront of that for decades and decades. And of course, their instruments are phenomenal and I absolutely love playing them. They're super creative, and this is something I want you guys to know about Yamaha. They support musicians at every level of their journey, whether you are a beginner, first time you've ever picked up a French horn or a trumpet, all the way through marquee artists like soloists and people who are playing all over the world. So Yamaha has been just incredibly supportive of not only my playing career, my teaching and coaching, but also supporting this podcast for all 3 seasons. So I want to just say thank you so much. If you want to know more, you can discover the world of Yamaha at usa.yamaha.com. And thanks again, guys, for supporting the show. We truly, truly appreciate it. Okay, let's get back to Neil. I'm going to try and push us along here because I have so many questions. Before we leave your sort of this part of the conversation, we could talk auditions and practice forever, I think. I'm curious about how you balance your career and your life, because your two main performing jobs, Grant Park Orchestra, phenomenal orchestra, Chicago Lyric, world-class opera orchestra. The jobs must be so different in terms of what you have to bring to the table and also the vibe and also the schedule. How do you manage to balance that with being a normal human being with other instruments, like other interests, like film, having a family, friends, social life, that kind of thing?
It's a wonderful problem to have. It's great. I mean, how do I balance it? My wife, who's probably watching, would probably say I don't, but I endeavor to try. Google Calendar is the best thing ever, just to kind of keep everything aligned. But what you're kind of talking about, yeah, I mean, we love what we do, Chris, and I love the variety. I kind of came back to Chicago and I started freelancing, and so the variety of jobs I played, I did shows in the pit. I played a show on Broadway in New York. I sub with the opera. I play a symphonic concert. I recorded a CD with a jazz orchestra here in Chicago. I mean, the variety is what it's all about, and like just doing the same thing week after week. Not to disparage a 52-week orchestra like the LA Phil, but I like variety. Maybe I've got ADD, but I like having this. Lyric is a shortish season, half the year. Grant Park's 10 weeks, and then I get to do different things. I sub with orchestras all over the country. I like to play chamber music. I like to collaborate with my wife, who's an amazing mezzo-soprano soloist. We do different things. So I actually really like it that I have this flexibility, and it really makes it very rewarding. This weekend I played with a group called Tank and the Bangas, like a really cool hip, like I could never aspire to be that hip band, and played some really cool stuff and watched some entertainers that commanded the stage and really had an effect on their audience. And then the next day I'm playing the Flying Dutchman. I love it. This is a great balance, and I still have time for friends and watching the thousands of movies a year that I watch, and make it work. Yeah, see my family, things I enjoy doing.
Just for fun, if you could pick any musician in any genre from any point in time to perform with, who would it be?
Man, that was a question I wasn't expecting. Okay, well, okay, so yeah, I'm I'm going to kind of turn the question a little bit, but I'm a huge nut about the music of Gustav Mahler, and he was a conductor, so I would love to play under him. There are no films of him conducting, there's no recordings of him conducting, but every account was like he was a god on the podium, and I just want to see what that was like. So there's my answer.
Mahler is a solid answer, especially from a horn player. You must know about his life, that he had that weird sort of body proportion issue where his like wingspan was longer than his height, and he had all these tics, and he was twitchy. And the scherzo from Mahler 9, Mahler 9? No. Da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da. What is that? It's 9, right? Is like all of these depictions of people making fun of him, like da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, and it's like this grotesque caricature. And then that beautiful dee, 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 is like, this is who I really am inside. I think that I would love to just go and give him a big hug and say, we see you, man. Also, stop writing such high trumpet parts.
Right. We're all a bunch of freaks, so I'm glad we all feel seen and stuff. But no, I mean, he, was supposedly an incredible presence, strange, weird, wonderful. And so, it would have been an experience to how he created this music and how he conducted it. So, he supposedly conducted, Mozart operas better than anybody in Vienna. And just, so it was in him, and he somehow was able to get it out into the world.
You talked about, so obviously you went and got a film degree on your travels to becoming the person that you are. I'm wondering if there are any films that inspired you musically, or do inspire you musically, or have some connection to the work you do as a musician.
I don't know if there's any like huge connection. To me, it activates a different part of my brain. I'm super visual, and so I play with an opera company, but I can't see the stage, and it's a terrible curse. But what I love about cinema is that I can put aside the listening. I listen to the dialogue and the music and everything, but to activate the visual part, I don't know, it's something that's always been in me, and I love the act of watching. There's actually a term for it called scopophilia, that you enjoy looking, you get some thrill out of that. And when I travel, I walk around and I look at buildings and people, and I don't know, when I'm looking at the notes, I'm super focused on those, but that doesn't satisfy that part of my brain. But watching films, the cinematography has always been something that I look for. So I don't have a real solid answer to your question. Sorry.
It was a totally out of the blue question. I just wondered if there was certain things that connected with you musically, and when comes to film watching. But mostly it was just a really cheap segue into a quiz that I was on the fence, but I took a poll on socials yesterday, and you got a 90% vote from everyone saying yes to a quiz. So we're going to give you a quiz from the Department of Things Our Parents Say When We Choose Our College Majors. What are you going to do with a cinema degree? Watch. Okay, and that's the name of the quiz. And question number 1 is, in the cinematic epic The Godfather, which seemingly innocuous fruit ominously symbolizes death in the film? A banana, its peel a metaphorical prelude to the descent into the abyss. B, a watermelon, its festive exterior concealing the inevitable clash of destinies. Or C, an orange, its vibrant allure disguising the shadows of looming destruction.
Wow, you even have like descriptions and stuff. So I love trivia, as my wife's probably rolling her eyes right now. And I knew the answer before you gave me the multiple choice, which is always fun. And it's C, orange.
That is correct. An orange, this fruit clearly had some sort of secret agenda in the film. Okay, you're going to love this next one. In the Soviet-era silent film, Battleship Potemkin, what ominous event incites the crew's mutiny? A, the abrupt cessation of their cherished weekly movie night. B, the gruesome revelation of a maggot-riddled cow carcass presented as dinner. C, an unforeseen ship-wide prohibition of sea shanties leading to a melodic uprising amongst the sailors.
I mean, Chris, you know me so well. Did you play this concert with us? Am I right? And we did
And
Battleship Potemkin at
I
Grant Park.
remember
Yeah, see, it's all
you did the lecture beforehand. You did the pre-concert
yeah.
lecture about this, and we made you Neil Kimel mask to wear in case you got scared, and we wrote all the clues on the back of it, which I really wish I had a copy of that mask, but it's probably long gone. So what's your answer?
We go way we go way back. The answer is definitely B.
Yes, a maggot-riddled cow carcass. Guys, I just want to say this is blasphemous, but if you watch the Battleship Potemkin, just watch it on fast forward. You're going to get all everything you need to. I know Neil would kill me for saying that. It's a crazy film. We could do a whole podcast on that. Okay, couple more. Is this okay? You doing all right?
I love this. This is
Okay.
making me so happy. Yeah.
Okay. In Hitchcock's terrifying classic Psycho, what is the quirky detail about the infamous shower scene? A, the visual trickery of chocolate syrup representing the chilling swirl of blood. B, the protagonist mysteriously ad-libbing, adding an unintentional layer of disturbing realism. Or C, the secret filming in a laundromat, its everyday normalcy amplifying the unforeseen terror.
Wow. I will go with A.
Chocolate syrup, who knew terror could be so sweet and chocolatey? Good, you're great at this. Okay, just a couple more. In the visionary Odyssey, 2001: A Space Odyssey, which melancholic tune does Hal reverberate as he's being deactivated? A, Daisy Bell, Bicycle Built for Two. B, You Are My Sunshine. Or C, If I Only Had a Brain. Ooh, did I stump you?
This sounds like a trick question to me. This is fun. I don't recall that. At first, I'm like, oh, you're picking all my like wheelhouses: Hitchcock, Kubrick, Battleship Potemkin.
The only reason I know the answer to this is because we played it recently, so it's fresh in my brain.
Just run down the answers one more time.
Bicycle Built for Two,
sure.
Daisy Bell, it's called. You Are My Sunshine, or If I Only Had a Brain.
I'm going to go with C, but I don't know.
No, unfortunately, the correct answer was A, Daisy, Daisy. And I'm singing on a live stream. What's happening? Yeah, it's a really eerie sort of serenade from Hal or AI longing for humanity, which is pretty relevant today, isn't it? Okay, we've done a couple serious films. We're going to shift gears and go to the comedy Airplane. What option does the captain choose for dinner to avoid food poisoning? Was it A, chicken, B, fish, or C, lasagna?
I think it was fish.
That's correct. He says, that's right. I had the lasagna, which actually wasn't on the menu. In Airplane, according to the airport's PA system, we lost about 3 listeners, so I'll wrap this up. In Airplane, according to the airport's PA system, the white zone is designated for A, immediate loading and unloading of passengers only, B, parking and retrieval of automobiles only, or C, meditation and quiet reflection only.
That would be A.
That's correct. No parking, no waiting, no exceptions. Okay, last one. In Airplane, what strange... if you get this, I'm going to be so impressed, by the way. This is a tough one. In Airplane, what strange item is featured in the What Can You Do With This in-flight magazine quiz? Was it A, a rubber chicken, B, a frying pan, or C, a whoopee cushion?
That's deep voice. That one I don't know. I'm going to say the frying pan.
Unfortunately, it was a rubber chicken. Flights can be boring even on that airplane, so that quiz was spicing things up. Wow, suddenly the chat got really quiet during the quiz, so I'll have to decide whether or not I keep doing these. I'd like to...
What did you study in school? I mean, God.
I know, right? Well, what was it... What actually, before we go on to the last question for today, why did you get a film degree? And also kudos to you for doing something outside of the narrow box of being a classical horn player. What was your inspiration for doing that?
I'll make a long story short. Basically, when I was a junior in high school, I asked my teacher, do I go to music school? And I'll never know to this day, but either he was like, don't do it, or he was just politely saying, have some options. But he said, if there's something else you're interested in, find a great horn teacher, find a school that offers your other interest, and see what happens. and that's the advice that I followed. So yeah, much to my parents' chagrin, a backup to music was filmmaking. Yeah, that's yeah, trying to understand that logic. But I've got great parents. I mean, come on, that's pretty good. So I went to a school, found a great horn teacher, found a school that allowed me to pick up a film camera on day one, and I got to shoot 16 millimeter, make films, all that. It was did both consecutively, and there just weren't enough hours in the day. I came down with mono. I just got really just run down because I'm trying to edit movies at 2 in the morning, practice, do my schoolwork, and have a social life, like you said. And so I decided to stick with the horn. I finished the degree in a more of a cinema studies area, which was less time behind the camera, more time just reading books and watching films, stuff like that. So it was great. I loved it. It rounded out my world. It I did a lot of reading of literature and watching films, and just it really did round out, made me understand some of the pieces of music that I played, and just yeah, brought my worldview a little larger. And that to this day, I wouldn't go back, and I do tell my students there's no one way to do this. If I'm any example of that, just hard work, like just putting your nose down, and you want to do it, you do it, but you don't have to go to a conservatory. It's good to have a good teacher. It's good to have great guidance. It's good to have examples to listen to and an orchestra to nearby to kind of guide you. But do you need to go to the conservatory? I obviously say no. At New World, it was always so funny to go through the roster and see, um, you know, CIM and Rice and Northwestern and all this, and then like my bio, and they're like, "What?" So it's always been a source of pride, and it to be a little different and to go that route. But I wouldn't have changed it. I'm so happy with the way it happened.
Rounding out your world. That's a great quote. I have one last question for you, and it's kind of about your honesty pill moments. We've all had those moments where we have to recognize something maybe we swept under the rug, or not addressed head on, that really can shake us up. Real talk. Do you have a memory of something that you had to sort of deal with, or a revelation that if you hadn't changed it wouldn't have positioned you to learn up, fail up, and end up where you are at this point in your life?
Yeah, definitely. We What we consider a level of preparation, I think, is it's just relative to our experience. We think I practice hard enough, I'm ready to do this at the, what I feel is my best. And that is a sliding scale. That's just something that needs to be constantly reevaluated. So in 2002, I it doesn't matter. I think it was 2002. Took an audition for lyric opera, and I was so prepared. I was so ready. I felt like I knew everything inside and out, and I did play, for me at that time, the best audition of my life. I came out of the audition so I played my last note, and mic drop. I was just like, okay, that was it. I just nailed that, and give me that job. And unfortunately enough, somebody else had the audition of their life the same day, and the decision was made to hire the other person. And it was heartbreaking. It was, a job in my hometown, and a job that I really desperately wanted, of second horn, and it was a heartbreak. And it took a long time to recover from that, and it was to make sense of it, to think, okay, that was my best, and it's not good enough. We've all been there. So fast forward a few years, and the talented person who won that job in 2002 was Jason Snyder, and he went on to win fourth horn of the Boston Symphony. I was very happy for him, and at the same time realized that that meant the position of second horn at Lyric was going to be open again. So I prepared the audition again when he was announced that he was staying in Boston. And I knew that what happened last time, I didn't want to have happen again. So somehow I needed to exceed my best. And that was daunting. It was really daunting. It was essentially the same audition list. So I had a kind of a advantage in some ways, but this is 5 years later, that I was taking the same audition. But with some knowledge, some experience, but also a realization that, like, okay, you thought you were prepared last time. Look back on it, find out what you really think, own up to your deals, find out what they were, and fix them. Otherwise, the same thing's going to happen again. And like the question earlier, how many mock auditions? I mean, I probably did a dozen for very kind, patient colleagues and friends. I put those excerpts into submission. I did everything in my power to live the day of the audition before the audition itself. And I played a better audition than the time before. Granted, 6 years had passed. I'd hopefully become a better player, but my standards were higher. My ability to let things slide or swept under the rug, as you said, was a stronger aversion to that, to really face those things. And I came into the audition loaded for bear and just ready to go, and really not aggressive in my presentation of them, but super confident, super excited to share these excerpts with the committee. It was a different mindset. It wasn't like I had something to prove. It was I had something to prove to myself, but I had this feeling of almost peace and confidence, and just like, this is a higher level of preparation. And if I was that close last time, I should at least have a shot this time. And again, coming in with that feeling of like, ask anything. I'm happy to play anything on here for you, and I'm excited to do it. I took chances at the audition. I played soft things really softly. I played loud things really loudly, but not too loudly. I made music, which I think for me is my biggest struggle in an audition, is to just make a phrase. And this is an opera company. You need to sing, you need to play phrases. So I spent a lot of time working on my musicality. And again, instead of focusing on missing notes or make a mistake, I was focused on positive things. And that allowed me to, in the moment, play my best. And I felt that I did. Mercifully, the committee and the conductor agreed. And that was my biggest successful audition, that made my mom cry, and I made myself also. And just it was emotional to kind of get a second shot at that.
I have taken so much of your time, and we didn't even get to talk about Tower Brass Ensemble, how you met Susan, New World. We have to do a round two, or at least I'll come to Chicago and we'll go have a beer somewhere. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and sharing your insights. This was a great time to catch up with everybody else listening, and also to hear so many great things.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate the invitation.
All right, hang on for a second. I'm just going to take us out here. I also want to say thanks to everybody in the chat. If we didn't get to your questions, feel free to email me, chris@honestypill.com, and I can forward those questions on to Neil. And if you're enjoying this podcast, do me a favor. Please, first of all, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give it a thumbs up. Hit that little bell so you get notifications of when new videos are dropping. And share this podcast with a friend if you like it and want to support the show. Okay, everybody, that's it for me. I'm out of here. And in case you need a reminder, it is time to face the music. Happy practicing, and I'll see you next time.